So we have a waiting game and many reasons to keep a close eye on the uncertainty in the United States as the outcome of the presidential election remains in question. Although, as the voting continues, the counting continues, the path to victory for Joe Biden seems to be there. Where could this all be headed, and how does Canada play that waiting game until a winner is declared? Let's bring in two guests following developments closely. Bessma Momani is a professor of international affairs and the assistant vice president of international relations at the University of Waterloo. And Christopher Sands is the director of the Canada Institute at the Wilson Center in Washington. Good to see you both. Thanks for being here. And Bessma, if I can, let me start with you. We'll talk about Canada specifically in all of this in a moment, but what do you think are the broader international implications of this unresolved vote in the United States and the way this is all playing out and the uncertainty around it? What kind of implications could that be creating?
Well, let's just say this is one of probably the most, American election watched across the world like never before. This is really quite remarkable. As someone said on the New York Times piece, it's like watching the World Cup. But of course, it's serious stakes at hand here. This is an important country for global, the global economic stability. And certainly if you have a continuation of a Trump presidency, which, in some parts of the world is welcomed, but in other parts of the world, shudder at the instability that he could bring, because certainly American foreign policy has been very unpredictable of late. So, yeah, the world is very much attuned to this, and I think really hoping that there is at least a clear conclusion at the end of all of it.
Chris Sands, what do you want to add to that?
Well, I think there will be a clear conclusion, but what I would tell, especially Canadians who know the U.S. in general very well, is that the U.S. is going through a transition. It's a transition from a period where we had relative stability in the U.S. in terms of what the party stood for and what you could expect from them, because the baby boomers were the largest part of our election cohort. They were the biggest cohort in the electorate. Now millennials are the biggest cohort in the electorate, and both parties have shifted their strategies and their bases in order to try to respond to that change. And I think that's why this election wasn't as decisive as many of us were hoping for. We're still in the middle of that transition, and there's all to play for as we try to adjust to a new era in American politics. Neither of these candidates, both well over 70, are really representative of that new generation. And in the next 4 years, even after the dust has settled in this election, one of the really interesting things will be how we see that new leadership emerging in the Congress, in state offices, and in the composition of the next administration. There's a lot going on, and it's all, as Bessma says, very, very important to the future, not only of the U.S., but of U.S. relationships internationally.
Well, let's talk about that. Bessma, let's talk about the Canada-U.S. relationship and what's at stake in this period of uncertainty. The Prime Minister is sitting on the sidelines while this gets sorted out. Is there any way he gets dragged into this fight?
Well, I mean, what I was always worried about is that Trump would start asking allies to basically commit to him in some way, show their allegiance, because he takes things very personal. And of course, I mean, the right thing to do is to wait until we get that kind of certification that this is really done, and not to play, favorite, so to speak. But of course, Trump doesn't think that way. He often takes things, again, very personal. Politics to him is about loyalty, as he often says. And so, he's going to be reaching out to allies. I wouldn't be surprised if he's at some point going through and grasping for straws, particularly if things continue in the momentum that they are, which is sort of a Biden victory, but slow one, to have other countries sort of show their commitment to Trump, which would put them in a very awkward position. And I can see, a number of countries, Israel's Netanyahu, you could see where MBS of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Sisi, number of countries out there that may be asked to basically, play for Team Trump, and that's not really good for any country, truly.
Chris, if there is continuing turmoil and challenges to the outcome of the vote as being promised by the Trump side, is there a point where governments, including the Canadian government, may have to pronounce on what's happening and actually pick sides?
Well, I don't think so. And this is a game of speculation about how the next few weeks will evolve. But I suspect what we're heading to is a version of what we've seen the last 4 years. For the last 4 years, Donald Trump has been a disruptive and highly unpredictable president, surrounded by a relatively weak political party. A Biden administration would flip that on its head. President Biden would be a relatively weak president, surrounded by a very disruptive party. The Democratic Party has a number of factions that are impatient to see real change in policy. And President Biden, a traditional Democratic centrist, doesn't come from the part of the party that has the energy behind it. Now, I don't think Canada get dragged in until January 20th when we draw in actually inaugurate a new president. But where this could get complicated is that just as Donald Trump was not a traditional president, I don't think he would be a very traditional ex-president either. He believes that conspiracy theories were launched at his administration trying to undermine him from the beginning. So a Biden administration begins with two strikes against it. One, a fractious party, and two, likely Donald Trump on social media, on television, exploiting every division between Biden and his base, as well as firing up opposition among Republicans and others to try to sandbag the Biden administration and prevent it from achieving really anything, which would be hard on a good day, but will be harder with Trump in the wings.
So, Bessma, let me hear you on that, because at some point, if the numbers play out the way they look like they're going to play out, and Joe Biden is declared the winner, but Donald Trump challenges that, how long does Justin Trudeau wait before picking up the phone or putting out a statement saying, "I'd like to congratulate Joe Biden"?
As long as possible. It's really not in any country's leader's interest to weigh in on this. It just isn't. I mean, I think on that front, Biden, if he is, the presumed president, is going to have a very uphill battle. Exactly as Chris said, but I'd also add too there, he has a very progressive wing in his own party. Yes, many of them are young, call them the Bernie Bros and others, who want a very different America. And they have a difficult uphill battle here because you also have a Republican, most likely dominated Senate. And so it's going to be basically difficult to get things done. They're going to push Biden to his limits. And so I don't think things are, as I think very much Chris noted, I don't think we're going to enter a period of stability, even if Biden is the president. And also, let's not forget here, Trumpism as an ideology and as a movement is very well and alive. I mean, this was not a blowout of this blue wave. And despite, high turnout, there is still a lot of support for Donald Trump. And what that is a populist nationalist narrative that sees indeed conspiracies at every turn, has enormous distrust of the elite and the deep state. All of these are code words to basically, frankly, disrupt what we think of as liberal institutions that have made America so great. So it's a very rough ride ahead for the Biden presidency if that's what happens.
And if we get a rough ride ahead for the Biden presidency, if that's what we get, a Joe Biden presidency, Chris, what are the consequences and implications of that for Canada?
Well, I'd say one thing, almost picking up on your last question. Joe Biden is no stranger to Canada. Many Canadians remember he represented the United States at the Vancouver Olympics in 2010. He's traveled to Canada. He's met Justin Trudeau. They've had opportunity to develop a relationship. So that's one reason I don't think Canada needs to rush here. It's not as though Joe Biden will take any offense. He'll look forward to working with Canadians at the right time. But at the same time, we have a number of files that are quite pressing. And although you always look for the chemistry between leaders, we still have to deal with the COVID pandemic. We're jointly restricting the border. That's been done on a 30-day rolling basis. How do we go from here forward on that? And then we need to revive the economy. We've all taken a hit. We're in a recession. We need to get the economy going. And of course, what happens in the U.S. tends to have positive effects for Canada if there's growth here, if we can get back on track. So Canada can't be indifferent to a lot of this. We really need that partnership to kick in at the appropriate time. All
right. Bessma Momani, Chris Sands, always good to get your views on these things. And it was great to hear from you tonight. Thanks so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.